Nathan Jackson. Now, a little bit about Mr. Nathan Jackson is he is known as a Tlingit master carver, and he has been carving for over 60 years. He's got works of art all throughout the world. He's got some in London, Germany, Japan, all throughout the lower 48, and back up through Alaska. If any of you guys would like to see some of Nathan's work, you can look in that red flip book there on that podium. As well as these drawings here, also done by Mr. Nathan Jackson. This one here is of a pole he did in the past. This pole is now down in the Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C. And this pole carries the same story as the Cox Bear pole outside. Now this other drawing here is for the pole that's laying down behind me. It's an inch to foot scale drawing of what this pole will look like in the end. This pole's name is the Ketchikan pole. It is a family crest pole that will be going up to Juneau on the docks with around 30 other family crest poles to represent some of the larger families throughout southeast Alaska. Now, when a carver is carving, he has three main types of wood he likes to use: western red cedar, yellow cedar, and red alder. Now, the first of those three woods I mentioned, western red cedar, is known as a tree of life amongst the Tlingit people for its many uses. First of which is the bark. Now, what we would do to go retrieve the bark is we'd go out to the woods, find a nice sturdy western red cedar tree, and then strip off about 1/3 of its bark at the most. This is because if we were to strip off any more than 1/3, it would end up killing the tree, and we'd like to leave it behind for future generations to be able to weave with. Now, that process would take about 20 years in time for the bark to grow back fully. Now, once we cut it off, we bring it home, clean it up, and then we would strip it down into smaller sizes till we got about the size we'd like to weave with. Now, what we would weave are things such as hats, baskets, headbands, sleeping mats, cedar rope. It was just basically anything that we can weave that the village needed. Now, the second use we have for red cedar is the tree itself. Now, we would use this for most of our larger projects, such as totem poles, dugout canoes, clan houses, and even the building you're standing in right now is made entirely out of western red cedar. Now, the second type of wood I mentioned to you guys, yellow cedar, is a denser, tighter grained wood, meaning it is a little bit harder to carve with, but it does tend to show better detail in the end. And now, for that reason, we use it for our smaller projects, such as rattles, paddles, dancing masks, dancing hats, panels, small totem poles, and then an interesting piece of art known as the bentwood box. Now, the reason I call the bentwood box interesting is because it is only made out of three main pieces, which are the bottom, the lid, and then the four sides in the middle. Now what a carver would do to make the middle four sides is he'd take a flat board, notch it in 3 separate places like this, steam it, bend it in on itself, and then wooden peg it here in the end. Well, in the old days, they would use a combination of crushed up seashells and the slime from halibut skin to act as a glue, and then they would tie spruce root around and put it all together while it dried. Now, once you finish with all that, it would look a little like this one here. This here is just an example of how smooth some of the edges can be in its final stages. Then all you can see here on this end, where it's held together by the wooden dowels and a little bit of Gorilla Glue. Now, these boxes can be made to be air and water tight, even without the Gorilla Glue. And now, the third type of wood I mentioned to you guys, red alder, we have two main uses for that wood. First of which is our cooking utensils, such as spoons, bowls, ladles. And the reason it exists is because red alder is a much less oily wood, meaning you can better taste the food that you're eating and not less the wood that you're eating off of. Now, the second use we have for red alder is our tool handles. Now, what a carver would do to go get a tool handle is he'd go out to the woods, find a nice 45-degree angle straight branch like this, cut it off, custom fit it to his hand, and then he would strap a blade on it. Now, before we had any metal or steel to work with, what we would use are things such as whalebone, beaver teeth, deer antler, obsidian, jasper. And more commonly found on our tools back then was jade.
Wow.
Which we get from a deposit up in the Junewary. Now, the type of tools that we make are like this one here. This here is known as the elbow adze. The reason we call it the elbow adze is because of its elbow-like shape. Now this will be used as a finishing tool to give the nice smooth textures you guys may have felt up at the clan house in some of the walls, the benches, or even the house support beams. They were all finished off with this type of tool here. Now one thing to note is there is no sandpaper used in any of the larger stages of our final projects. I think I said that a little backwards. Now, they would all be finished off with this type of tool here. And the next tool I'd like to show you guys is the lip adze. The lip adze is similar to the elbow adze, just with a little bit of a larger blade, and the lip on each side of the blade here is used to help guide the tool, taking off larger chunks of wood. This will be used in the middle stages of the totem to help give it its rough general shape. Second here. Next tool I'd like to show you guys is the ship adze. The ship adze is similar to the lip adze, so on a little bit of a larger scale, and it is a bit more modern, as you guys can tell by the modern axe handle here, to give it a little bit of a better swing. Now this will be used on the, oh my brain. This will be used to hollow out the back side of the totem pole and to hollow out the inside of the dugout canoe. Now some of you guys may be wondering, why do you hollow out the back side of the totem pole? Well, the reasoning for this is because red cedar tends to rot from the inside out. So along with prolonging the life of the totem, you would take off a good chunk of its weight as well. And now along with those three tools I just mentioned, carvers have an assortment of straight and bent knives, along with a set of chisels and a mallet, to get some of the finer details on the totem. And now once we're finished carving, there's three main types of paint we usually use. First of which is this red color here, which we get from iron oxide, or better known to some of you guys as rust. Secondly, is this bluish green color here, which we get from copper oxide. Now lastly, is this black color here, which we get from charcoal or coal when it was more readily available. Now originally, it was the women's job in the village to make the paint. Now how she would do it, she would take the materials, grind them up to a fine powdery form, put that powder into a bowl, and then grab a handful of raw salmon eggs. Put it into her mouth, chew it up, and mix it with her saliva. And then with the clenched cheese, she'd spit that mixture into the bowl, after knocking any eggshells or egg pulp into the paint. And that would give us one of our first early oil-based paints, which out in the elements here will last anywhere from 25 to 100 years.
Wow.
But nowadays, though, we don't know exactly why, but the women in the village really don't like to make our paint anymore. This does force our carvers to head down to the local Ace hardware store and get some custom blended paints. Now, a couple of the common questions we do get here is how long does it take to carve a totem? Well, a carver can typically get between a foot to a foot and a half done per week. This depends on the skill of the carver, the amount of detail going into the pole, and the amount of time he has to work on it. Because the carver is usually working on more than one project at a time. Now another common question we get is how much does it cost to have a totem pole commissioned for you? Now for a carver who's just starting out, still trying to get his name out there, he could charge anywhere from $500 to $1,000 per foot. Now for a little more well-known carver, he's been carving for a few years, he could charge anywhere from $2,000 to $4,000 per foot. Now for a master carver, he could charge anywhere from $5,000 or more per foot. But just keep in mind, these are just estimates. They're not exact numbers. The exact numbers would have to come between the commissioner and the carver. Now with that said, who wants a totem? Just messing with you guys. But a couple of common places we do get commissions from are places such as museums, airports, schools, the cruise lines, or even private buyers such as yourselves who enjoy the art and have the money to spend on. And now the last common question I'd like to answer for you guys is how did you used to raise a totem pole? Well, originally what we would do is we dig a 6 to 8 feet deep hole into the ground, build an A-frame over that hole, and then tie some cedar up around the top of the totem. And then we would gather a bunch of men together, and to the beat of the drum, we would all start raising the pole. Now while the pole's being raised, the main carver of the totem would be off to the side, dancing with his tool belt around his waist. And now once the pole is fully raised, we will fill that hole with sand, rocks, and gravel to hold the pole tightly in place. For a visual representation of that, you guys can look up there at the diagram behind me. Now, before I answer any questions you guys may have, I have a question for you. Wasayati.
What?
Come on, you guys. I heard one of you. I thought we were getting better.
Oh.
It's all right. I'll give you guys another shot this time around as well. So the answer I was looking for from all of you guys all at the same time was click, was, saw.
Click, walk, saw.
All right, let's try this again. Wasayati.
Click, walk, saw.
There we go. That sounds much better. But for any guys who still get it wrong that time, by the way, can I ask for a show of hands for the first volunteers to help us make some paint? Just messing with you guys. And now, if you guys have any questions, you guys can feel free to ask them. Yes, sir.
How many totem poles has Master Chief Jackson made?
He's wondering how many totem poles have you made?
I was working on a project here with my son a while back, and I said, well, over 30 or so, and he said, no. So we got home and we counted over 50.
50 totem poles.
I just keep it at that.
I remember you from a long time ago, 25 years